When we think of ancient history, our minds immediately go to the pyramids of Egypt or the stone cities of the Maya. But what if the most baffling, impossible ancient sites on Earth are hidden somewhere else entirely? Somewhere much older. Welcome to Australia, a continent famous for its deadly wildlife and endless outback. But deep within its sacred lands lie cosmic calendars that map the stars, massive engineering projects that predate the pyramids by tens of thousands of years, and unexplained hieroglyphs that, according to mainstream textbooks, simply shouldn't exist. Strap in, because today we are counting down 9 jaw-dropping Australian discoveries that are about to rewrite history as you know it. Our journey begins in one of the most desolate, hauntingly beautiful landscapes on the planet, a dry, wind-swept lakebed in New South Wales known as Lake Mungo. Today, there is no water here. Instead, you are greeted by massive, white sand dunes carved by time, looking less like Earth and more like the barren surface of Mars. For thousands of years, this place sat in absolute silence, keeping a profound secret buried deep beneath its shifting sands. But in 1968, a sudden storm of geological discovery changed everything. An archaeologist named Jim Bowler was exploring these exact dunes when he stumbled upon something that would send shockwaves through the global scientific community. Peeking out from the eroded earth were heavily charred ancient human bones. These were the remains of a young woman, now respectfully known worldwide as Mungo Lady. But the real mystery wasn't just who she was, it was how she was treated after her death. When scientists brought these bones to the lab for carbon dating, the numbers that came back left them speechless. This woman had lived and died over 42,000 years ago. Let that sink in for a moment. 42 millennia. At that exact point in time, Europe was still icebound and largely populated by Neanderthals. Modern humans were barely scratching out a survival in many parts of the world. Yet right here in the heart of the Australian outback, a deeply sophisticated human society was already thriving, and what they did for Mungo Lady was unlike anything archaeologists had ever seen from that era. You see, Mungo Lady wasn't just buried. She was ritually, carefully, and systematically cremated. The evidence showed that her people had first placed her body on a funeral pyre. After the fire burned down, they didn't just leave her. They returned to the ashes, painstakingly crushed her remaining bones, and then placed them into a safe, shallow grave. But they didn't stop there. They covered her remains with a thick layer of red ochre, a sacred, brilliant mineral pigment that had to be transported from miles away. Just a few years later, only meters away, archaeologists found Mungo Man. He was buried around the exact same time, his body fully intact, his hands gently clasped together over his groin, and also covered entirely in that same sacred red ochre. This isn't just a grim archaeological find. This is the absolute oldest evidence of ritualized human cremation ever discovered anywhere on Earth. Why does this matter? Because cremation isn't a primitive survival instinct. It requires abstract thinking, a profound belief in the afterlife, and a deeply structured spiritual system. It proves that the ancient ancestors of Aboriginal Australians possessed a complex understanding of life, death, and the human soul at a time when the rest of modern humanity was practically in its infancy. Mainstream history books often tell us that civilization and complex religious thought began in the Middle East or Europe just a few thousand years ago. But the silent, white walls of Lake Mungo stand as living proof that history is much, much older and far more beautiful than we were ever led to believe. When you hear the phrase, ancient astronomical observatory, your mind probably jumps straight to England. You picture Stonehenge, those massive, iconic stone pillars standing tall against a misty British sky, built around 5,000 years ago to track the movements of the sun. For centuries, mainstream history has praised Stonehenge as one of humanity's earliest leaps into the world of science and astronomy. But what if I told you that on the other side of the planet, hidden in the sweeping grasslands of Victoria, Australia, there is a stone arrangement that does the exact same thing? Except there's a catch. This site wasn't built 5,000 years ago. According to local custodians and researchers, it could be much, much older. Welcome to Wurdi Youang, a site often called the Aboriginal Stonehenge, and it is a place that challenges everything we thought we knew about the birth of science. To the untrained eye, if you were to walk past Wurdi Youang today, you might just see a random, slightly messy collection of rocks scattered in the dirt. It consists of about 100 basalt stones, arranged in a strange, egg-shaped oval that stretches about 50 meters across. Some of these stones are small, barely reaching your ankle, while others are massive, heavy boulders weighing several tons. For generations, Western agricultural settlers walked right past this site, dismissing it as nothing more than natural debris or primitive cattle pens. But in recent years, astrophysicists and archaeologists decided to formally map the entire structure. They set up advanced surveying equipment, charted the coordinates of every single rock, and waited for the sun to move across the sky. And what they discovered was an absolute masterpiece of ancient engineering. They realized that this egg-shaped ring wasn't random at all. The entire structure is a highly precise solar calendar. If you stand at the 3 lowest stones on the eastern side of the ring and look across to the west, the stones align perfectly with the exact points on the horizon where the sun sets during the summer solstice, the winter solstice, and the equinoxes. Think about the level of sophistication required to build this. The ancient Wathoron people didn't just accidentally drop these multi-ton rocks into a perfect alignment. They had to deeply understand the tilting of the Earth, the changing of the seasons, and the precise orbital path of the sun over a period of many, many years. They used these stones to predict when the seasons would change, allowing them to know exactly when food sources would be abundant and when it was time to move. This completely shatters the old, Eurocentric narrative that ancient Australians were merely nomadic hunters who lived day to day without any structural science or permanent connection to the land. Wurdi Youang proves that Australia's First Nations people were, in fact, some of the world's very first astronomers. They were mapping the mechanics of the cosmos while Europe was still in the deep dark of prehistory. It forces us to ask a profound question. How many other ancient scientific wonders have we missed simply because we didn't look close enough, or because we assumed ancient cultures weren't capable of them? The stones of Wurdi Youang have been quietly staring up at the Australian sky for millennia, waiting for us to finally look down, open our minds, and read the cosmic map they left behind. Imagine an engineering marvel so durable, so perfectly designed, that it has survived intense river floods, massive climate shifts, and the passage of tens of thousands of years. When we think of ancient megastructures, our minds naturally drift to the Roman aqueducts or the Great Wall of China. But long before Rome was even a thought, and long before the first stone of the Great Wall was laid, a profound piece of civil engineering was already operating flawlessly in the heart of Australia. Welcome to the Brewarrina fish traps, known traditionally to the Gympie people as Baiame's Ngunhu. Stretching for half a kilometer across the bed of the Barwon River in New South Wales, this is not just a collection of rocks. This is one of the oldest continuous man-made structures still standing on the face of the earth. According to Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, during a period of catastrophic drought, the creator god Baiame looked down at his starving people with deep compassion. He reached into the spiritual realm, designed a massive net made of stone, and cast it across the riverbed to capture food for the community. But if you look at this site through the cold lens of modern science, the reality is just as mind-blowing as the myth. What you are looking at is a massive, incredibly complex hydrodynamic labyrinth. The ancient builders didn't just throw rocks into the water. They hand-selected thousands of heavy river boulders and meticulously arranged them into a series of interlocking, curved stone walls. These walls form shaped pens and stone channels that snake across the entire width of the river. But the true genius lies in how it manipulates physics. The height and curvature of every single stone wall were engineered to respond perfectly to the changing water levels of the river. When the river is high, The water flows smoothly over the tops of the walls, allowing fish to swim upstream naturally. But as the water level begins to fall, the shape of the stone pens forces the water to spin and slow down, funneling the fish into specific, shallow holding pools where they can be easily caught by hand. It was a self-sustaining, endless food production system. Even more incredibly, this wasn't designed for greed. The traps were divided among different tribal groups, ensuring that everyone got enough food, while always allowing enough fish to pass through safely to breed upstream. For decades, mainstream history textbooks taught that the indigenous people of Australia were strictly nomadic, wandering hunters who never settled down, never built permanent structures, and never altered their environment. The Brewarrina fish traps stand as a monumental, unbreakable contradiction to that entire narrative. This site proves that over 40,000 years ago, ancient Australians possessed a highly advanced understanding of hydrology, river ecology, and stone masonry. They built a permanent, sustainable piece of infrastructure that outlasted almost every empire in human history. It shouldn't exist according to old historical biases, but it does, and it forces us to redefine what it truly means to be an advanced civilized society. If you want to read the deepest history of Western art, you visit the Louvre in Paris. If you want to see the heights of the Renaissance, you look at the Sistine Chapel in Rome. But if you want to visit the largest, oldest, and most expansive open-air art gallery on the face of the earth, you have to leave the museums behind. You have to travel to a remote sun-bleached peninsula in Western Australia called Murujuga, also known as the Dampier Archipelago. At first glance, this place looks harsh and uninviting, a chaotic, alien landscape covered in millions of heavy iron-rich boulders that glow like burning coals under the fierce outback sun. But as you step closer, and as your eyes adjust to the glare, you realize that almost every single one of these dark rocks is staring back at you. This is a library of human memory etched permanently into stone. Scientists estimate that Murujuga contains over 1 million individual pieces of rock art, or petroglyphs, scattered across the landscape. 1 million. This isn't just a place where ancient people doodled for a few years. This is a continuous, unbroken visual archive of humanity that spans an incredible 50,000 years. Think about that timescale. The people who carved these images began doing so during the heart of the last ice age. Generation after generation, for 50 millennia, elders and artists sat among these boulders, using harder stones to carefully peck and chisel their stories into the rusty iron crust of the rocks. When you walk through Murujuga, you aren't just looking at art. You are walking through a time machine that documents the changing of our entire planet. And that's where the real mystery begins. The art on these rocks shouldn't exist as a living record, yet it does. Etched into the boulders are highly detailed depictions of animals that haven't walked this continent for thousands of years. You can see clear carvings of the thylacine, the famous Tasmanian tiger, which went completely extinct on the Australian mainland over 3,000 years ago. Even more shocking, there are petroglyphs showing massive, bizarre land mammals, megafauna that mainstream paleontology says died out shortly after humans arrived. There are even carvings of land-bound creatures on islands that are now separated by miles of deep ocean. This means the artists were carving these images when the sea levels were so low that the islands were still connected to the mainland. They literally recorded the end of the Ice Age in real time. For a long time, modern society treated these ancient carvings as primitive graffiti, completely ignoring their historical value. Today, industry and chemical plants are encroaching on the borders of Murujuga, threatening to erode the very rocks that hold these priceless memories. But the local traditional custodians, the Ngarrindjeri people, are fighting to protect it, because to them, this isn't just history, it's a living law book, a sacred map, and proof of their eternal connection to this land. Murujuga shouldn't exist if you believe human history is short and easily forgotten. It stands as a powerful, rock-solid monument proving that human memory, when carved with reverence and intent, can outlast the rise and fall of every single empire the world has ever known. Deep in the sun-scorched crimson heart of Australia's Northern Territory, the horizon seems to stretch on forever, in a flat, unbroken line of red dirt and spinifex grass. But as you travel down the lonely Stuart Highway, the monotony of the desert is suddenly shattered by a sight that feels completely alien. Rising out of the flat desert floor are hundreds of massive, glowing red granite boulders. Some are as large as double-decker buses, and many are shaped into near-perfect, smooth spheres. This is Karlu, known in English as the Devil's Marbles. At first glance, it looks as though a playful race of giants gathered these colossal stone marbles and scattered them across the valley, or that an advanced extraterrestrial intelligence deliberately stacked them to mock the laws of physics. The most mesmerizing, and frankly, terrifying thing about Karlu is how these rocks manage to stand. Many of these multi-ton spheres are balancing precariously on top of one another, or resting on tiny, jagged rock bases. They look so unstable that you feel as though a gentle gust of wind or the touch of a human hand could send them crashing down the hillside. Yet they have stood perfectly still, defying gravity, for thousands of years. If you ask a modern geologist to explain this impossible place, they will give you a very clinical, scientific answer. They will tell you that hundreds of millions of years ago, a massive block of magma cooled underground, cracked into rectangular blocks, and was slowly pushed to the surface. Over millennia, water and wind eroded the sharp edges away, leaving behind these smooth, spherical cores. But while science focuses on the chemical composition of the granite, the local indigenous custodians, the Mungo people, have a much deeper spiritual connection to this landscape. To them, this site is profoundly sacred, and they call it Karlu, which literally translates to round boulders. According to their ancient Dreamtime stories, these giant spheres are not the accidental leftovers of geological erosion. They are the fossilized eggs of the rainbow serpent, laid during the creation of the world. Other legends whisper that a great ancestor named Orange, while walking through the valley, wove a traditional hair belt, and as he spat on the ground, the clusters of saliva transformed into these massive granite structures. For the Mungo, every single rock here is alive with spiritual energy. In the late 20th century, mainstream society committed a massive sacrilege against this sacred place. In 1953, a massive 9-ton boulder was removed from Karlu and taken all the way to Alice Springs to be placed on the memorial grave of John Flynn, the founder of the Royal Flying Doctor Service. To the traditional owners, this was a devastating wound. It broke the spiritual songline and balance of the land. It took 45 years of intense legal battles and emotional trauma, but in 1999, the rock was finally returned to its rightful place, restoring the spiritual integrity of the site. Today, the Devil's Marbles stand as a powerful reminder that some places on Earth transcend simple geology. They shouldn't exist if the world is just cold science. They are monuments of gravity-defying wonder and living cathedrals of an ancient faith. If you wanted to preserve the history of your civilization for the next 20,000 years, how would you do it? In our modern world, we rely on digital hard drives, cloud storage, and microchips, technologies that can degrade, corrupt, or lose power in a matter of decades. But deep within the World Heritage-listed wilderness of Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory, there is a giant sandstone monument that has successfully preserved human history for over 20 millennia without a single line of digital code. Welcome to Nourlangie Rock, known traditionally as Brewarrina. Rising dramatically out of the surrounding eucalyptus forests, this monolithic red cliff isn't just a geographical wonder. It is one of the most significant, spiritually charged time capsules ever created by human hands. For hundreds of generations, the sheltered rock galleries of Nourlangie provided a canvas and a sanctuary for the Mungo people, especially during the harsh tropical monsoon seasons. As you walk beneath the massive, overhanging stone ledges, you are suddenly confronted by walls covered in vibrant red, white, and yellow paintings. This is the world-famous X-ray style of rock art. The ancient artists didn't just paint the outside silhouettes of animals. They painted internal organs, skeletal structures, and spinal columns. You can look at a barramundi fish, a kangaroo, or a turtle painted thousands of years ago and see exactly how its anatomy works. This wasn't just art for aesthetic pleasure. It was a highly detailed educational tool used by elders to teach younger generations about biology, anatomy, and sustainable hunting practices. But as you look closer at the walls of Nourlangie, the art shifts from the physical world into the profound realm of the supernatural. Standing out among the animal figures is a terrifying, colossal entity painted with massive, hollow eyes and stone axes attached to his elbows and knees. This is Namargon, the Lightning Man. According to local Dreamtime belief, Namargon is the powerful ancestral being responsible for the violent, world-shaking lightning storms that tear across northern Australia every summer. He splits the clouds using his stone axes to generate thunder. What makes this painting so jaw-dropping is that it represents an unbroken oral and visual tradition. The stories told about Namargon today are the exact same stories passed down through the centuries, making it one of the oldest continuous religious narratives on Earth. Mainstream history often tells us that ancient cultures without a written alphabet are destined to be forgotten, their histories erased by the passage of time. Nourlangie rock completely rewrites that assumption. The Stonehenge people didn't need paper or printing presses. They turned the very bones of the continent into a permanent, weatherproof library. This place shouldn't exist as a living archive if our modern theories about the fragility of human memory were correct. Yet the pigments on these walls remain vibrant, and the messages remain crystal clear. Nourlangie rock stands as an eternal monument to the power of human storytelling, a place where the past is not dead, but silently speaking to anyone willing to stand before the ancient stone and listen. When we think of pyramids, our minds immediately go to the desert sands of Egypt or the dense jungles of Mesoamerica. We are taught that these colossal monuments belong exclusively to the great empires of the Old World. But what if I told you that hidden inside a dense eucalyptus forest in Queensland, Australia, there is a heavily terraced hill that looks exactly like a step pyramid? Welcome to the Gympie Pyramid, perhaps the most controversial, heated, and polarizing archaeological mystery on the entire continent. For decades, this site has been the ultimate battleground between mainstream historians who want to debunk it and alternative researchers who believe it represents a forgotten chapter of human history that could completely destroy our current timeline of global exploration. If you visit the site today, the structure is heavily damaged, overgrown with weeds, and partially destroyed by the construction of a modern highway. But look closer at the old photographs and surviving sections. You can clearly see a sandstone hill carved into a series of 6 distinct geometric terraces, lined with precision-cut stone walls. Mainstream academia offers a very simple, comforting explanation. They claim the Gympie Pyramid is a complete hoax. According to local records, they say the hill was built in the late 19th century by a Swiss or Italian immigrant farmer who simply wanted to terrace the steep slope so he could grow grapes for a vineyard. To the history textbooks, the case is closed. It's just an old, ruined retaining wall made by a creative European farmer. But for alternative historians, that explanation is way too convenient, and it leaves behind a trail of bizarre clues that simply don't fit. First of all, why would a farmer spend a massive fortune and thousands of hours cutting heavy sandstone into perfect blocks just to plant a few rows of grapes on a random hill? But the real mystery deepened when strange, out-of-place artifacts began turning up in the surrounding area. The most famous is the Gympie ape, a small stone statue carved from ironstone, depicting a squatting ape-like creature that looks remarkably like the ancient Egyptian god Thoth in his baboon form. There were also reports of bronze coins, strange pottery fragments, and inscriptions that some claim resemble ancient Phoenician or Chinese scripts. None of these things should exist in prehistoric Australia. If these artifacts and the pyramid walls are genuine, it means that thousands of years before Captain Cook or the Dutch ever sailed into these waters, ancient global maritime empires, whether they were Egyptians, Phoenicians, or Chinese, were already landing on the coast of Queensland, trading with the locals, and building stone monuments. it would mean our global history books are completely wrong. Mainstream experts reject this, claiming the artifacts were either faked or dropped there much later. Today, the Gympie pyramid remains a ghost in the woods, silent and heavily ruined. It shouldn't exist if our neatly packed timeline of history is correct. But whether it's a forgotten monument to a global ancient trade network, or just the ruined dream of an immigrant farmer, it stands as a fascinating reminder that history is always a matter of perspective. Imagine trekking deep into the dense, snake-infested bushland of Karlu, New South Wales. You are surrounded by classic Australian eucalyptus trees, the sound of cicadas, and absolute wilderness. But as you squeeze through a narrow hidden cleft between two massive sandstone walls, the landscape suddenly shifts from the Australian outback to the ancient tombs of Luxor. Etched deeply into the stone are nearly 300 masterfully carved symbols. You see the Eye of Horus, Anubis the jackal god, and royal cartouches. Welcome to the Gosford Glyphs, a place where ancient Egypt seemingly collides with prehistoric Australia. It is one of the most famous, baffling, and heavily guarded secrets on the continent. A site that, if proven genuine, wouldn't just twist our history books, it would completely set them on fire. The story etched into these sandstone walls is incredibly detailed. According to alternative translators, the glyphs tell a tragic, ancient tale of an Egyptian expedition that sailed to Australia over 4,000 years ago. The inscriptions claim that the expedition was led by Prince Nefertiru, the son of the pharaoh King Khufu, the very man who built the Great Pyramid of Giza. The text describes how their ship was blown off course, how they landed on the shores of Australia, and how the young prince was tragically bitten by a venomous snake. His loyal crew allegedly buried him deep within the Australian bush and carved these hundreds of hieroglyphs as a permanent monument to their lost prince, leaving a message in stone for anyone who might find them. Unsurprisingly, mainstream academia and professional Egyptologists reject this story entirely. They label the Gosford glyphs as a clever, modern hoax. The official explanation is that the carvings were created in the 1920s by Australian soldiers returning from World War I. These soldiers had spent time stationed in Egypt, became fascinated by the culture, and supposedly used their trench tools to carve these symbols into the rocks for fun. Other experts point out that the hieroglyphs are a chaotic mix of styles from different dynasties, containing grammatical errors that a real royal scribe would never make. To mainstream science, the case is closed. It's nothing more than a historical graffiti project made by bored, modern pranksters. But alternative researchers refuse to back down, and they raise some deeply unsettling points. They argue that the grammar used in certain sections of the wall belongs to an archaic form of the Old Kingdom, a highly specific dialect that wasn't even widely translated or understood by modern scholars back in the 1920s. How could a bunch of bored soldiers fake a language that experts hadn't even fully mapped yet? Today, the site is recognized by local indigenous elders as a sacred place of healing, adding another layer of deep mystery to the area. The Gosford glyphs shouldn't exist in a world where history is neat and linear. Whether it's the greatest historical hoax ever executed or the actual tomb of an Egyptian prince who died on the other side of the world, it stands as an unforgettable enigma wrapped in sandstone. Our final location brings us to a place that bridges the gap between the red earth of Australia and the infinite expanse of the cosmos. Hidden in the rugged, forested hills near Milberdale in New South Wales lies a massive, weathered sandstone cave opening. To the ancient Wurdi people, this is not just a geographical feature. It is a profound portal to the creation of our world. Welcome to Baiame's cave. As you step inside the cool shadow of this hanging rock shelter and look up at the back wall, your breath is instantly caught in your throat. Staring down at you from the stone is a colossus, a giant, painted figure stretching several meters across the rock. This is Baiame, the great Sky Father, the supreme creator god of many southeastern indigenous nations. The imagery of Baiame in this cave is both awe-inspiring and profoundly mysterious. He is painted with massive, deep, non-human eyes that seem to pierce right through your soul, regardless of where you stand in the cave. But the most striking feature is his arms. They are colossal, reaching out to the left and right, spanning meters across the sandstone surface like giant sweeping wings or a divine protective shield. According to ancient Dreamtime lore, Baiame didn't walk out of the desert. He stepped down from the stars. He created the mountains, the rivers, and the sacred laws for humans to live by. Once his work on Earth was complete, he didn't die. He spread his massive arms and flew back up into the heavens where he still sits today, watching over humanity. But when alternative historians and ancient astronaut researchers look at the painting of Baiame, they notice a series of mind-boggling parallels that cross international borders. They point out that this giant, flying, wide-eyed creator god looks remarkably similar to the ancient sky god paintings and petroglyphs found thousands of miles away across vast oceans. You can see identical motifs in the Wurdi spirit art of Western Australia, the Hopi legends of North America, and even ancient rock art in the mountains of Europe and Africa. Why did completely isolated ancient civilizations, separated by continents and millennia, all paint the exact same image of a giant, flying entity with oversized eyes who descended from the stars to teach humanity? It is an echo that shouldn't exist if human cultures developed in total isolation. Mainstream anthropologists view these global similarities as mere coincidence, a natural human tendency to depict powerful spirits with large eyes and wings to represent the sky. But for the traditional custodians of the land, the debate over aliens or coincidence completely misses the true majesty of Baiame's cave. To them, this cave shouldn't exist as just a tourist attraction. It is a living cathedral. It is an unbreakable 20,000-year-old link to the spiritual realm. The giant arms of Baiame painted on that wall have been reaching out across the centuries, reminding us that we are part of a grander, cosmic story. It stands as a breathtaking finale to Australia's impossible ancient places, proving that the true history of our world is far more expansive, mysterious, and connected to the stars than we ever dared to dream.